No one could have imagined that the starving Viking who knocked on her door would become the richest man in all the northern territories, and that their love would forever change two worlds that had been sworn enemies. The widow's struggle. In the vast plains of Northumbria, where the northern winds punished without mercy and survival was an art few mastered, lived Astrid Bjørn's daughter on a farm that had seen better days. At 28 years old, this woman with auburn hair and eyes green as emeralds had learned that life gave nothing freely to those born without important family names. The farmstead Greenhope had belonged to her late husband Eric, a good man but without fortune, who had died in an accident with the livestock 2 years prior. Since then, Astrid had fought alone against debts, moneylenders, and the silent scorn of a settlement that considered it improper for a woman to manage lands without a man's supervision. The dawn of September 15th, 947 A.D. began like any other, with Astrid milking the few cows she had left and preparing the fresh cheese she sold at the Jorvik market. But the dark clouds accumulating on the horizon announced a storm that would change her destiny forever. When the first thunder rumbled over the mountains, Astrid ran to secure the animals in the barn. The wind began howling like a furious demon, tearing the roof tiles from her cheese house, her only real source of income. Lightning illuminated the sky like silver scars, while rain fell with the force of 1,000 waterfalls. That night, huddled in her small house, while listening to the storm destroy years of work, Astrid cried for the first time in months. She had no money to repair the roof, and without the cheese house functioning, she would lose the farm in less than 2 months. Jarl Magnus Haraldsson, the most powerful man in the region, had already made insulting offers for her lands, waiting like a vulture for the moment of her complete desperation. At dawn, the panorama was even worse than she had imagined. The cheese house roof had almost completely disappeared. Broken tiles covered the ground like fragments of her shattered dreams. The clay walls had cracked from moisture, and all the cheese-making equipment was soaked and useless. Astrid sat among the ruins and contemplated the magnitude of the disaster. She would need at least 30 silver pieces for repairs, a fortune she didn't have and wouldn't have. The men from the settlement who could do the work charged prices she couldn't pay. Moreover, many of them followed Jarl Magnus's silent orders not to help her. The stranger arrives. It was while contemplating her ruin that she heard slow footsteps approaching along the path. Looking up, she saw a tall, lean figure walking toward her. He was a man with bronzed skin, black hair long to his shoulders, and dark eyes that reflected deep sadness. He wore worn leather trousers, a patched cotton shirt, and carried a small pack that seemed to contain all his possessions. The man stopped a few meters away and observed her with respect, not approaching too closely. Astrid immediately noticed the features that identified him as from the Sami tribes of the far north, people her community feared and distrusted. "Lady," he said in Norse with a marked accent, but comprehensible, "forgive the intrusion. I saw your destroyed roof. I can repair it." Astrid stood slowly, evaluating the situation. The man was clearly Sami, which meant trouble with the neighbors if they found out. But she also noticed something in his eyes. There was hunger there, not just for food, but for purpose, for dignity. "How much would you charge?" she asked, though she knew she probably couldn't afford it. The Sami looked again at the destroyed roof, mentally calculating the necessary work. 3 meals a day while I work, and a place to sleep. Nothing more. The answer completely surprised Astrid. The other workers demanded money she didn't have, but this man only wanted food and shelter. It was an opportunity she couldn't waste, though she knew hiring a Sami would bring problems with the settlement. "Do you really know how to repair roofs?" she asked, studying his face for signs of deception. "My people built houses that withstood worse storms than this," he responded with contained pride. "I worked on the construction of the Great Hall in Bergen before everything changed." There was pain in those last words, an untold story that Astrid sensed but didn't dare ask about. What mattered was that she desperately needed help, and this man offered it at a price she could afford. "What is your name?" she finally asked. "Bjorn," he responded simply. "It means bear in your tongue." Astrid made a decision she knew would bring her trouble, but was her only hope. "All right, Bjorn. You can stay in the barn and eat with me, but I want the roof finished in 1 week." Bjorn nodded solemnly. "It will be finished in 5 days, lady, and it will be better built than before." While Astrid showed him where he could sleep and served him the first hot meal he'd had in days, neither knew they had just begun a story that would challenge all the prejudices of their time and forever change their lives. The Master Craftsman. That same afternoon, when Ingrid the washerwoman, the most gossipy woman in the settlement, saw smoke coming from Astrid's chimney and a strange figure working on the roof, she immediately ran to tell Jarl Magnus what she had seen. The seed of conflict had been planted, and soon it would germinate into a storm even more destructive than the one that had destroyed the roof. At dawn of the second day, Astrid woke to the rhythmic sound of hammer against wood. From her window, she could see Bjorn already working on the roof, moving with grace and confidence that surprised her. This wasn't the clumsiness of a man desperate for work. It was the precision of someone who knew his craft deeply. During breakfast, Astrid observed Bjorn's hands as he ate. They were strong but careful hands, with calluses that spoke of years of manual labor, but also with a delicacy that suggested something more refined in his past. When he thanked her for the meal in perfectly pronounced Norse, she dared to ask where he had learned the language so well. "My mother was Norse," Bjorn explained, his gaze lost in distant memories. "She married my Sami father against her family's wishes. They sent me to the monastery school when I was a boy. The monks thought I could be useful as an intermediary between our peoples." "And what happened?" Astrid asked with genuine curiosity. Bjorn's expression darkened. "War happened, lady. It always does." After breakfast, Astrid went outside to observe the work more closely. What she saw left her breathless. Bjorn wasn't just replacing the broken tiles. He was reinforcing the entire structure with techniques she had never seen. He used wooden beams at specific angles that better distributed the weight, and had begun building a gutter system that would direct rainwater away from the foundations. "This is much more than we agreed upon," Astrid commented, impressed by the work's quality. "A roof should last generations," Bjorn responded without stopping his work. "There's no point in doing something halfway when you can do it right." As the days passed, Astrid noticed that Bjorn worked from dawn to dusk, with barely a break during meals. They spoke little, but she began noting details about him that intrigued her. He could read and write, something many men in the settlement couldn't do. He knew about medicinal plants and helped cure an infected wound on one of her cows. And at night, when he believed she wasn't watching, he carved small wooden figures with extraordinary artistic skill. Growing feelings. On the fourth day, while Astrid prepared the meal, she heard agitated voices approaching the farm. Through the window, she saw Jarl Magnus accompanied by 3 of his men, all mounted and with severe expressions. Her heart raced as she realized they had come for Bjorn. "Astrid, Bjorn's daughter!" Jarl Magnus shouted before dismounting. "We know you have a Sami working here. That is unacceptable." Astrid came out to face them with her head held high, though her hands trembled slightly. "I have a worker repairing my roof, Jarl Magnus. I don't see how that concerns you." "He's a savage," one of the men roared, spitting on the ground. "Probably spying on our defenses to attack us later." Bjorn had come down from the roof upon hearing the agitated voices. He maintained respectful distance, but remained visible, his hands relaxed at his sides to show he represented no threat. His posture was dignified, but not defiant. "That man," said Jarl Magnus, pointing at Bjorn with contempt, "is an enemy of our people. The Sami have raided settlements, stolen livestock. How can you be so irresponsible as to give him shelter?" "That man is repairing my roof," Astrid replied firmly. "He has shown no aggression. He has worked honestly in exchange for food and shelter." Jarl Magnus approached threateningly. "I give you 24 hours to throw him out. If by noon tomorrow he's still on your property, we will take measures to protect the settlement." After they left, Astrid found Bjorn finishing cleaning his tools for the day. She expected to find him worried or frightened, but his expression was calm, almost melancholic. "I can leave tonight," he said without looking at her. "I don't want to bring you trouble." "No," Astrid responded with determination that surprised even herself. "You have worked honestly. You deserve to finish what you started." Bjorn looked at her then with intensity that made her tremble. "Why do you risk so much for a stranger?" Astrid thought about the question while preparing dinner. Why was she risking her reputation and safety for a man she barely knew? Perhaps because she recognized in him something she understood too well. The loneliness of one who doesn't fit anywhere. The pain of one who has lost more than the heart can bear. "Because everyone deserves a chance to prove who they really are," she finally responded. "And because I see in you a good man who has suffered injustices." That night, while Bjorn slept in the barn, Astrid remained awake, gazing at the stars from her window. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but for the first time in a long while she didn't feel completely alone. She had found in that silent Sami something she had lost when her husband died. The presence of someone she could trust. The confrontation. Noon of the 5th day arrived with a scorching sun that seemed to presage the human storm approaching. Astrid had spent the morning helping Bjorn finish the roof, passing him tools and admiring the complete transformation of her cheese house. He hadn't just repaired the damage, he had improved the entire structure until it became something better than it had ever been. When the settlement bells marked 12, Astrid saw a dust cloud approaching along the path. This time, it wasn't just Jarl Magnus and his 3 men from yesterday. They brought a dozen armed settlers with rifles and expressions that promised nothing good. "It's time for you to leave," Astrid murmured to Bjorn as they watched the group approach. "No," he responded calmly, slowly descending from the roof. "A man doesn't run when a brave woman has risked everything to defend him. If they're going to judge me, let them judge me face to face." Jarl Magnus dismounted with a triumphant expression, followed by the other men who dispersed, forming a threatening semicircle. Among them, Astrid recognized some of her neighbors: Olaf the blacksmith, Harald the merchant, even young Leif, who had played with her late husband when they were boys. "Time's up, Astrid," Jarl Magnus declared authoritatively. "That savage must leave now, or we'll take more drastic measures." The revelation. Before violence could erupt, the sound of hooves echoed from the surrounding hills. Warriors appeared from the forest, Sami tribesmen who had been watching and waiting. But more surprisingly, behind them came Norse settlers. Entire families Astrid recognized as people Bjorn had helped medically during recent weeks without her knowledge. Old Magnus, whose grandson Bjorn had saved from mortal fever, stepped forward carrying an official document. "Jarl Magnus," he said with respect but unshakable firmness, "I bring signatures from 28 families testifying about this man's healing work. He has helped us all without asking for payment." The document passed from hand to hand among Jarl Magnus's men, who examined it with growing unease. It was then that from the group of Sami emerged a figure that made even the bravest feel a chill of pure terror. It was an older man mounted on a magnificent white horse, with silver hair decorated with eagle feathers, and a presence that radiated natural authority. "Sacred heavens," Olaf murmured, immediately recognizing the legendary figure. "It's Arnstein the Wise." The name ran through the men like a cold wind. Everyone had heard of Arnstein, the mythical Sami chief who controlled the richest silver mines in all the northern territories. Stories said his wealth surpassed that of some jarls. Arnstein dismounted with grace, approaching slowly the group of Norsemen who now seemed like mice trapped by a cat. When he spoke, his voice resonated with accumulated power of generations of tribal leaders. "I am Arnstein, chief of all the Sami tribes of these mountains," he declared in perfect Norse without a trace of accent. "And the man you threaten is my adopted son, heir to my position and all my wealth." The words hit Jarl Magnus like hammer blows. His face lost all color as he comprehended the magnitude of his catastrophic error. He hadn't just antagonized any Sami, he had declared war on the heir of the most powerful and feared chief in the entire region. This is Norse territory," Jarl Magnus stammered, though his former arrogance had completely evaporated. "You have no legal authority here." Arnstein smiled, but there was no warmth in that expression. "Young fool," he responded, with voice dripping controlled contempt. "These mountains were ours when your grandfather's grandfather hadn't yet been born. Our rights to these lands are written in treaties signed by your own kings." One of the warriors approached Arnstein and handed him a leather bag carefully preserved. The Sami chief opened it and extracted several documents that even under midday sun looked official and important. "Treaty of Bergen, 920 AD, Arnstein read with voice resonating with legal authority. "The Sami peoples retain all mining rights in the northern mountains. My mines were legally registered with the Norse kings in 935 AD. I have more legal right to be on these lands than any of you." The truth revealed. "But that's not the most important thing tonight," continued Arnstein, now addressing Astrid directly with steps measured and respectful. His eyes, which moments before had shown the hardness of steel against Jarl Magnus, now shone with paternal warmth. "What's important is that my son has found a woman who loves him for who he truly is, not for what he possesses." Arnstein stopped before Astrid and, to everyone's surprise, bowed in a deep ceremonial reverence. "Lady Bjornsdottir, your late husband Eric was known among my people as a man of honor. He traded honestly with us when others sought to deceive us. His memory is venerated in our camps." Tears began rolling down Astrid's cheeks, hearing Eric spoken of with such respect. For 2 years she had carried alone the weight of preserving his memory. Not knowing that his goodness had transcended cultural barriers others considered insurmountable. "Bjorn has told me the whole story," continued Arnstein, his voice resonating with genuine admiration. "How you defended him when your entire settlement turned against him. How you risked your safety and reputation to protect a stranger who only asked for the opportunity to work honestly. That's not simply kindness, lady. That's true courage." The Sami chief then turned toward Jarl Magnus and his men, who remained grouped like frightened sheep under the silent watch of the warriors. His expression hardened again as he addressed them. "For generations, you have treated my people like wild animals. You have broken sacred treaties, stolen our ancestral lands, killed our innocent children. But this extraordinary woman has demonstrated to us that honorable Norsemen exist, people capable of seeing beyond skin color to find the human soul." Arnstein made an almost imperceptible signal, and several warriors appeared from the shadows carrying finely carved wooden chests. They placed them carefully on the ground and opened them with ceremonious precision. The contents made everyone present hold their breath in absolute astonishment. Gold in perfectly cast bars gleamed under the sun like captured suns. Worked silver with intricate designs that spoke of centuries of Sami artistic mastery shone with an almost supernatural brightness. Emeralds the size of quail eggs emitted green flashes that seemed to contain life's very essence. Perfect pearls gleamed like newly born moons, each more valuable than everything most of these men possessed. "This is the dowry I offer for Lady Bjørn's daughter's hand for my son," announced Arnstein, with ceremonial pride that resonated through the entire afternoon. "More wealth than your Norse eyes have ever contemplated." Jarl Magnus stared at the treasures displayed before him with an expression mixing greed, terror, and growing comprehension of his error's magnitude. He hadn't just antagonized the most powerful Sami in the entire region. He had tried to destroy the union between a tribal chief and the woman who had conquered his heart. "But there's much more you should know," continued Arnstein, clearly enjoying the devastating impact of each revelation. "Lady Bjørnsdottir's lands, this farm you consider so insignificant, sits directly above the richest silver veins our expert miners have discovered in a century. Its real value exceeds everything Jarl Magnus possesses, multiplied by 15. The proposal. Bjørn approached Astrid and took her hands with infinite tenderness. "But all this material wealth is secondary," he intervened. "The true fortune doesn't reside in gold or silver, but in finding someone who loves your soul more deeply than your possessions." Arnstein smiled with paternal pride that completely transformed his severe face. "Precisely why I know my son will be a great chief when the time comes. He has learned the most important lesson, that true power emanates from earned respect, never from imposed fear." The Sami chief addressed Jarl Magnus one more time with authority that admitted no discussion. "You have exactly two options before you. You can leave now and live in absolute peace, respecting the new family that will form. Or you can persist in your ignorant hostility and face the inevitable consequences of having declared war on all Sami tribes united under my leadership." The threat wasn't vain or exaggerated. Everyone knew Arnstein controlled not just his own tribe, but a confederation of Sami bands extending thousands of miles. Declaring war on him meant condemning the entire region to death. Jarl Magnus and his men retreated in sepulchral silence, defeated not by brutal violence, but by the overwhelming revelation of their own insignificance before forces they had never truly understood. The wedding. 3 weeks later, under the full moon, Bjørn had solemnly promised Astrid. The most extraordinary wedding the region had witnessed in its entire history was celebrated. Father Olaf, proven to be the only priest with enough courage and vision to officiate a ceremony between a Sami chief's heir and a Norse widow, combined ancient Christian traditions with ancestral Sami rituals, in a celebration that symbolized the sacred union of two formerly enemy worlds. Astrid wore a wedding dress made from the finest silks that Sami gold could buy in the most distant cities, but she prominently kept the emerald necklace that had belonged to Bjorn's mother, visible symbol of her acceptance into the tribal family. Bjorn wore ceremonial robes that unequivocally proclaimed his high status as heir chief, but in his hands he proudly carried the small wooden figure he had carved, the woman protecting her home, eternal symbol of what Astrid represented to his soul. The guests included not only Sami warriors and some brave neighbors from the settlement, but also prosperous merchants from distant cities who had traveled entire days to witness this historic union. When the sacred moment of wedding vows arrived, Bjorn spoke with clear voice in both Sami and Norse, ensuring all present completely understood his words. "Astrid, you saved me long before knowing who I truly was. You gave me honest work when I was hungry. You defended me bravely when I had enemies. You loved me unconditionally when my heart carried pain. You didn't just repair my cheese house roof, you completely repaired my shattered soul." Astrid responded with a clear, firm voice that resonated throughout the ceremony and reached the hearts of every person present. "Bjorn, you came into my life precisely when everything seemed forever lost. You returned the hope I believed dead. You taught me that true love transcends all imaginable borders. I promise to walk with you proudly in both worlds, serve as a bridge of understanding between our peoples, and love you beyond this life into eternity." 5 years later. 5 years after that transformative night, the farm Grunhop had metamorphosed into a prosperous estate that served as the nerve center of peaceful trade between Norse and Sami peoples. Astrid and Bjorn had been blessed with 3 beautiful children who spoke both languages with perfect fluency and naturally served as living ambassadors between the two formerly confronted cultures. Jarl Magnus, completely humiliated by the revelatory night's events, had hastily sold all his properties and moved silently to Bergen, where no one knew his shameful history. His lands were acquired by visionary merchants who preferred peace's lasting prosperity to war's destructive pride. In the golden afternoons of Northumbria, when the sun painted the mountains with tones of gold and crimson, Astrid used to sit on the porch of her completely renovated house, contemplating the majestic peaks where her impossible love story had begun. Her children played happily in the flourishing garden, while Bjorn worked on his construction projects, now recognized as the region's most respected architect, famous for ingeniously combining ancestral Sami techniques with modern Norse needs. Do you ever stop to imagine what your life would have been like if I hadn't arrived to ask for work that fateful day? Bjorn asked one golden afternoon, sitting beside her on the bench he had built especially for these moments of shared contemplation. Astrid smiled with profound serenity, radiating genuine happiness, watching her prosperous and completely happy family playing in the garden that had once been only a distant dream. "I don't need to imagine it," she responded with absolute certainty. "This is exactly the life destiny had prepared for me. The roof you repaired wasn't just my cheese house. It was the protective roof over my shattered heart." Bjorn took her hand with his usual tenderness, contemplating the emerald necklace she proudly wore every day as symbol of their eternal love. "And the work you gave me wasn't merely repairing broken tiles. It was completely repairing my lost faith that two seemingly different worlds can merge into one when built on the unshakable foundations of true love." Their 3 children ran toward them, shouting in a happy mixture of Norse and Sami, living, breathing symbols that authentic love can not only overcome the deepest differences, but can create something beautiful, new, and completely extraordinary from those very differences others consider impossible to reconcile.